I see my picture here. Okay, YouTube is up. All right, we're live on YouTube. Oh my goodness, you guys, crazy people with the emojis. Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to my virtual school visit. We are only 10 minutes behind. It's totally fine. You guys on YouTube, if you would rather join me on Instagram, it might be a little more seamless. I'm at Vesper Illustration, so you can go over to there and join me live. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is, first of all, my daughter is here with me, and I'm going to just have her wave real quick. She is, surprise, surprise, home from school. And so that's kind of why we're doing this as well. Hey, Christine, how are you? I'm not going to be able to wave at everybody because I'm trying to like manage, two platforms here. The Facebook Live is just not working. And we're just not even going to worry about that. Okay. So how's everybody doing? Is everybody home from school? I want to just say, like, yeah, I know, right? I just want to say with the comments, my daughter's here to help me manage the comments and everything, but I would really appreciate it if you guys could just like slow down a little bit because not only am I, I'm just going to miss stuff if we go, if we're just like constantly doing comments. There will be a time for Q&A. And I want to just be able to do that pretty seamlessly here. Okay, so who's home from school? Anybody actually in school and watching this with your class? That would be kind of crazy. But I'm just going to assume that we're all home and we're all doing social distancing and we're washing our hands and doing all the responsible things, right? Anybody here still in school with your class? Hi, Chad. Welcome. Okay. So what are you guys doing with your open time? Anything creative? Want to tell me about it? The link to my Instagram doesn't work. You just have to go to my Instagram and hit the story, the live, I'm just live. So if you follow me, you'll see the live, or if you just click on my profile picture, not the link. So try to do that. You're coloring. I see, Victoria is coloring, doing a lot of coloring. Epic gaming. Okay. Playing Roblox. Who else? Learning lettering and getting back into crochet. Oh, that's fun. Okay. So you guys are doing some creative stuff, gaming, hiking. Good. Hooking the toaster to your PC. Okay. Long walks with my family in the woods and golf course. Not much. Okay. Anybody like really getting close with their dog or cat? Like, oh, working on the book for Marshall and Anna's class. Oh, hi, Carly. So you're in the MFA. Just painted a portrait of Maya Angelou, gotten out of a stuck place artistically. Wow, awesome, guys. Great. We're going to talk about some of this creative stuff. Fortnite. All right, great. So how are you guys doing with keeping in touch with friends and keeping some sort of social thing going on? I want to know about that. Let me know. How's it going with that? Trying to communicate to my faculty every day with regards to remote and digital resources. Good. So you're getting some time with colleagues, writing a book. Good. My dogs are right next to me. Hi, doggies. Oh, good doggies. Text and video calls. Going to your friend's house. Ooh, Evan. Going to your friends' houses. Eating with friends. Okay, just be careful, limit how many friends you go and visit with. I know I'm an extrovert and I'm like dying here. I'm really trying to, the part of the reason I'm doing this live stream is just to like get some communication with people. Oh, no friends. No, you'll meet friends on here. My friends are pencils. Okay. So if you guys are not familiar with who I am or what I do, my name is Vesper Stamper. And that's why you're here. And I'm an author-illustrator. And, oh, I'm glad you were looking forward to it. Great. So I write and illustrate mostly historical fiction for young adults. And I also illustrate picture books. So I'm an illustrator primarily, first and foremost. I came to writing pretty pretty much later in life, and I love it and I hate it. And it's the toughest job I've ever done beside being a parent. And yeah, so I actually, I have a book that came out a couple of years ago, which some of you may have read in your classes, called What the Night Sings. It's a book about the post-Holocaust time period and how people recovered from the Holocaust. And I have a new book coming out in August called A Cloud of Outrageous Blue. And I, oh, could you hand me the book? Okay, so it's not out yet, but here is an advanced copy. It's called A Cloud of Outrageous Blue. You guys can all see it. Sorry about the glare. And in a very kind of strange twist of fate, or twist of serendipity. Oh, my daughter wants me to show you this. This is What the Night Sings. So if you guys haven't read this, being homebound means you have a lot of time to read. So go ahead and get your hands on a copy of What the Night Sings. You can pre-order Cloud of Outrageous Blue. It won't come to you, but if you are desperate for something to read, you can sign up for my newsletter on my website and you'll get a free outtake chapter. And I also will be reading a little bit from this book today. So that's pretty fun. Okay. So the reason I'm doing this virtual school visit is because I actually had a school visit at a middle school scheduled for Monday. And I was looking forward to it for weeks and weeks. I love doing school visits, and I love meeting students and talking to readers. And I visit middle schools, high schools, universities, places that aren't school, different groups and stuff. And I love it. I mean, like I said, I'm an extrovert. I love this stuff. And I was so disappointed that this school got closed very suddenly, obviously. And I didn't get to see my readers or talk to my readers. So I thought, well, I'll just go online and do it. So, so that's, and you know, I'm not the only one. I saw today that Jared Krasaska is doing one. I've seen Sophie Blackall is doing some read alouds with, you know, for younger kids and stuff. And so it's really great to see authors kind of stepping up and, you know, creating community with you guys. So my daughter wants you to say what school. No, I'm not going to say what school. Sorry about that. Oh, I see some people who I've met here before. That's great. Okay. Yeah. Introvert's Dilemma. Pepper Fox. I know who you are, Pepper. All right. So I just figured we're just going to jump in and I'm going to give you a synopsis of A Cloud of Outrageous Blue, talk about it. Oh, Dan Santat's doing one. Great. And then I'll do a reading. I'll talk to you a little bit about how this book kind of weirdly dovetails into what we're all experiencing right now. And then we'll do a Q&A. And then I'll be able to read your comments a little bit more quickly. Yeah, you can close that. Sorry if anybody was on Facebook and, you know, hope you're jumping over here. All right. So what is A Cloud of Outrageous Blue? I'm going to read you the synopsis. Hold on one second. Okay, so I'll just read this right off of Amazon. And if, by the way, if you want to order a copy of Cloud of Outrageous Blue, please go to indiebound.com before you try any like Amazon or B&N or whatever. Go to IndieBound first, because right now, with all of us quarantined and people going out less, independent bookstores really need our support. And so if you're going to order any books, whether it's mine or anybody else's, go to IndieBound and try to find your local independent bookstore first. And you can order online. You can usually order online through them, or just give them a call and tell them, you know, to order it to their store and they can have it sent to your house. And but if we can support our local bookstores first, that's just the best way to do it. Okay. So for fans of Fever 1793, if any of you read that, comes the story of a young woman paving her own path and falling in love during the Great Plague of 1348 from the award-winning creator, that's me, of What the Night Sings. All right. Edith grew up in a quiet village with a loving family before losing everything she holds dear in the blink of an eye. Suddenly sent to live in a priory and work with ancient texts, Edith must come to terms with her new life and the gifts she discovers in herself. But outside the priory, something much worse is coming. With the reappearance of a boy from her past and the ominous Great Plague creeping closer and closer to the priory, it will be up to Edith to rise above it all and save herself. All right. And it's a new journey of self-discovery and love in the most uncertain times. So you may have seen why this book has some special relevance to what we're dealing with right now. So A Cloud of Outrageous Blue takes place in 1348 in England. And it's about a girl who has some different gifts than the people around her, some different ways of perceiving. And the Great Plague of 1348 comes barreling down on England. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the plague, what came before it, what came after it. I am so chilly. I'm going to put on a shawl here. I'm literally shivering. I've got my heater going and everything, but it's just not cutting it. Wow, chilly. Okay. So what is the Great Plague? Now, the plague can refer to two types of plague, either bubonic plague or there's a lung type of plague. And the plague that hit in 1348 may have been a combination of these two. Bubonic plague has actually been around as long as human history has been around. We hear of outbreaks happening in Roman times, and it's actually still around today. The difference with it is that we have, modern technology and modern medicine to deal with it. So we don't have these huge outbreaks of plague like we used to, but this was something that would come around every now and then. But one of the worst outbreaks of it happened between 1348 and 1351, about 1347, 1351. And it began kind of along the Silk Road and spread westward to Europe and basically killed anywhere between 30 to 60% of the population of Europe. I'm talking killed them, not just infected, but, lost an average of about half the population of Europe. It's also sometimes called the Black Death. That was a later, after this outbreak in 1348, it took on the name, the Black Death. But you can call it the Great Plague, the Black Plague, the Black Death, whatever. And it had several, there's my cat Treacle. It had several outbreaks between 1348 and 1700 that were very major. In fact, Shakespeare was actually born during one of these outbreaks. And there's a great article in Slate talking about how the plague was a thematic backdrop in a lot of his plays that, we kind of glance over, but he took it for granted that this, was happening. So, let's see. But yeah, the one in 1348 is the one that when we talk about the Black Death, we're really talking about that outbreak. And it led to a lot of different responses. There were, obviously very bad responses to it, but there were a lot of interesting things that came out of it historically. When you write historical fiction, you kind of learn that, what came before the event that you're writing about and what came after the event you're writing about are just as important and just as interesting as that particular event. So prior to the Great Plague in 1348, in England, there was a huge famine around 1317 or so. And the climate was actually changing. The climate was actually in a large amount of flux. There was a really big global warming event that we call the medieval warm period. And then the climate suddenly shifted a lot colder and a lot wetter. And so in 1317, there was a huge famine because of this, this cold spell and this wet spell. And a lot of people died from that, from famine. And so you had an already decreased population. And then in 1348, this plague kind of hit this sort of already weakened it was a generation later, but the population was already, a little smaller and a little weaker, and people really succumbed to it. So that's what happened before. But then what happened after the plague was really interesting too, because you had half of the population who had died. And so what do you do with all of, for instance, you had kind of the opposite problem of like all of, the crops that had been planted, but you didn't have enough laborers to bring it in. And so you had sort of an abundance of food on the one hand, but also not a way to distribute that food. And so, people went hungry from that too. And then, but after that, there was this huge boom in creativity and in learning. And part of that was people, this plague was this outbreak was so huge and so kind of out of control that nobody knew how to treat it. And medieval medicine was a lot different than the kind of medicine that we have today. It wasn't modern in any sense. But because people were trying to find ways to stop the spread of the disease or cope with it, a lot of advances in medicine actually came from this. Also, a lot of advances in art. We would not have, for instance, the Renaissance if we hadn't had the plague. So obviously the plague was devastating and tragic, but history does move on and it moves forward. And we had this amazing boom of creativity and people kind of working out these tragedies in creative ways. And it led to, the Renaissance, but also the advent of modern medicine and also the advent of labor rights and people being able to set their own prices for their own labor, because where they might have previously been tied to a lord on a manor and had to, just farm what was around them, now they could go out traveling looking for their wages and they could demand, this is how much I want for my labor. So it's kind of a really interesting, I see Joe Sue. What plague are we talking about? We're talking about the Great Plague or the Black Death of 1348 in Europe. Okay. So I'm going to do a little reading from A Cloud of Outrageous Blue, and then we'll talk a little bit about it, and then we can jump into some Q&A. So thank you guys for joining and staying with me. Thank you especially for being patient with my little technical difficulties in the beginning. All right. Okay. So I'm going to just read the first chapter here, and this is A Cloud of Outrageous Blue. Everyone in the canvas-covered cart is asleep. 4 other travelers nestle into the deep straw bed of the cart, strangers all of us except for a father and his son of maybe 9 or 10 years. The old monk there is a snorer, and it takes him the whole trip to get his bones comfortable. When I got into this cart, the only space had been next to the woman with the gray hair, the pink fleshy face, the gentle-eyed, reticent smile. She made as much room as she could, but someone's knee or elbow is always in my side. Like the proverbial thorn. That's what Ma'am would have said. "Tusmore Village," says the driver. "Everyone out who needs a piss." The monk needs help getting out, so I lend him a hand. From the gap in the cart cover, the white winter sun blinds me, and when my eyes adjust, it's like I haven't left Hartley Cross at all. They look the same, these villages, and each one makes me hurt for home. I don't dare leave my satchel in the cart for curious eyes or fingers. It wouldn't be right to say that all of my worldly possessions are here in my stitched-up bag. Most things I had to leave behind. The blankets, the cooking kettle, Pounce barking me home, and Juniper winding around my ankles with that deep purr. The sheep, the trees, the forest trail. Don't forget the fort you built with Henry against that uprooted oak. Don't forget the scent of the fields in the rain. Don't forget the crack on the daub wall that looked like a fawn's face. Don't forget. I reach into the satchel and run my fingers over each item until I feel the drawings I made of my parents. What's left is barely discernible, the fine lines made with the brass stylus on fire-browned parchment, burned in a moment of anger. Don't forget Dad's face, and don't forget Mam's face, and don't forget baby Sis's face, nor even your brother Henry's. I would have stuffed the entire house into the satchel if I could, But I only took what fit: Mam's cloak and dark woad blue gown, the small clay honey pot Henry gave me, my best willow charcoal twigs rolled in a piece of linen to draw with. I hold the stone cross from Mason and sense his impact on it, his hands shaping and smoothing it. And don't forget Mason's hands. I may have to surrender all these things when I get to the Priory, but it's a risk worth taking. They're all I have left of everyone I love. It was only yesterday, mid-morning, when everything changed. Edie? Henry's voice was alarmed. He shook me, shook and shook. Edie, wake up! I stirred, shoved his hand off my shoulder, and looked sideways at my big brother. Suddenly, everything came rushing back like a tempest. Dad's murder. Mam's death birthing baby Sis. Mason avoiding me, just like the rest of the villagers. The fear of starvation. The intensifying fights with Henry as we got more and more desperate. Death and loss and fury and hunger. Get away from me, I grunted, rolling back over. You weren't waking up, he said. Are you all right? No. Henry ignored me, grinning, almost dancing with excitement. I sat up slowly, suspicion gnawing in my belly. Edie, I know where you're going to go. Henry, we talked about this, I reminded him. You said we were leaving together in the spring. You said that Lord Geoffrey would wait until then to evict us, remember? I know, but this is better. Brother Robert's got a prioress friend up north, and she said she'd take you in. Lord Geoffrey agreed. It's St. Christopher's Priory in Thornchester. It's all sorted. They normally only take noble women, but out of charity, they'll take you as a conversa. A priory? The word felt like a fresh, icy slap to the side of my head. And a conversa? A lay sister? A servant? So instead of being a wooler's daughter with at least some dignity, I'll be cleaning the latrines of prissy nuns? How was that better? What do you mean it's all sorted? I pressed him. Who put you in charge of me? Henry looked stunned. Dad did, Edie, when they murdered him. Of course it was Henry's decision. I knew that. The moment Dad died, Henry became head of house. But that didn't really give him options. He still had to answer to Lord Geoffrey Caxton, the very man who killed our father. Oh, computer starting up. We were bound to Lord Geoffrey, and I was bound to Henry, but I didn't want to accept it. Henry was only 2 years older than me, my brother, not my lord. But don't you understand, he coaxed? It's better than we could have hoped. You and I would have been lucky to find a house half this size to rent in some strange place, scraping by on someone else's land. We could have been beggars. I tried to be calm, but I just couldn't. This is it then, Henry? 16 years old, and the best thing I can hope for is to rot away in some convent, where they send the old hags and toady girls, and I should be grateful? Go to hell. The words singed my mouth as I spat them. And Henry flinched, all the optimism drained from his face in a moment. He set his jaw and spoke with an unnerving softness. Fine, Edith. I tried to do my best by you. If this is your thanks, then we'll say goodbye now. The wagon will be here for you at dawn. He opened the cupboard and grabbed half a loaf and filled his water skin with ale. I had never been angry with my big brother before, my best friend, my hero. But my desperation lit one last flaming arrow on my tongue. Traitor! It's you and me, Edie, I mocked his childhood promise. What a lie. You don't care about anybody but yourself. It's Henry, and to hell with little sister. Edith, round and red, might as well be left for dead. Fate had cornered and caged him. He clenched his teeth, and his muscles pulsed. He sniffed hard, walked quickly out of the house, and slammed the door to my enraged scream. I sank to the floor, skirts in a pool around me, and cried. The day darkened early. A raindrop hung pregnant from the edge of the windowsill, all silvers except for a thin strip of rainbow edging its metal belly. I feel those colors on my tongue, like the time when I tried licking the edge of the cold kettle just to see if it tasted like I thought it would. Yes, like blood and ash, like the dark brown stripes that appeared at the sides of my eyes. That was when Mam could stir things in the kettle, the green Alexanders with the fresh spring butter. She could stir things in a kettle because she was alive. That was when Da was alive too, and he would dip the hardest edges of the brown bread and sop up the iron-tinged butter, and it would drop in his beard and glisten there for a bit until he'd grab the corner of Mam's apron and wipe his mouth proper like a gentleman. But my father was no gentleman, much as Mam would have liked him to be. He was stout and red-bearded and loud and butter-drippy. Da with a belly like the raindrop, with a belly rivaling Mam's, carrying the child that would end her life. Nothing can be done about it now. Come spring, Lord Caxton will turn Henry out, and someone else will be living in that house where I was born. Someone else will make their porridge on our fire, rise their bread dough in our proofing pot. But before the next family moves in, they'll bring the priest to cleanse the house of the evil that once resided there, the scourge that caused a whole family to fail. So that's chapter 1 of A Cloud of Outrageous Blue. Hope you guys liked it. So let's see. All right. How do people handle crisis when it comes? So here in chapter 1, we see, Edith is handling the crisis of having lost her parents and having nowhere to go. And her brother finds her a place to live in a monastery, in a convent for nuns. Oh, I see Susan Bairney. Stay tuned for some Battle of the Books virtual questions, some from What the Night Sings. Oh, that's great. Okay, so her school is doing Battle of the Books and has What the Night Sings. Sorry, Emily. Yeah, you do have to wait till August to find out what happens next, but we're hoping to be able to roll some discussion about the book out early. So yeah, great. So What the Night Sings is Battle of the Books. Great. Okay. So how do people handle crisis when it comes? So she's being sent to this convent where she knows nobody. It's at the other end of the country from where she is. This is in an age before mass communication. She can't just call her brother home. It's when she leaves, she leaves. So when Henry says goodbye, it's goodbye. It's very unlikely that that they'll ever see each other again. I want to talk about how people handled the plague, for instance, that crisis. There's the crises that we have in, to make it easier to wait, you should probably pre-order. Great. Thank you, Lori. Okay, I'm getting a little distracted here. How do people handle crisis? So one of the main responses in crisis when something is bigger than you is obviously fear. And, sometimes people will get so afraid that if they have anxiety underlying, it gets really bad. Or if it's, if people have, if they have obsessive compulsive tendencies and there's something like an illness outbreak, it might make them anxious. And, but during the plague, all of those things happened. And, but people didn't understand things like washing your hands, or there was, efforts at quarantine and things like that. But that was mainly out of not an understanding of how germs would spread, but out of just fear of who could be carrying it and making you sick. Okay. One of the things that we are seeing right now is hoarding. We're seeing, I went yesterday to a store and the guy told me that in the parking lot he had seen that morning a Lexus SUV with the entire trunk full of toilet paper. And he thought that was kind of a risky move to park your car filled with toilet paper in a parking lot and think that people wouldn't be tempted to break into your car. But, there's a lot of this self-protection and I want to take care of me and my family, but it doesn't really matter if that affects other people or not. And you see that too with a lot of people kind of flouting the recommendations, to stay at home and saying, I don't care. I'm just going to go out and, go to the mall or, or go out with my friends or go to a bar or a restaurant or whatever. And that's also, equally a very, kind of selfish response to that. Some people ignore it. They deny it. They downplay that it's actually a crisis, or they say it's a conspiracy theory, you know, these kinds of things. But I want to tell you, it's not a conspiracy theory. We just got a call yesterday that our first friend with coronavirus, we just learned of actually 2 people yesterday who have coronavirus. And so this is not a conspiracy theory. And these people are on completely opposite ends of the country. And thankfully, they're going to be okay. But, you know, but I want to talk about some of these conspiracy theories that came into play during the Great Plague of 1348. One of those, unfortunately, was anti-Semitism. Now, you know, my first book is about the post-Holocaust period. And in that book, I have a section in there where I talk about persecutions of the Jews that have happened for the last 2,000 years, and it tends to be cyclical. I will get to some of these questions later. There will be a Q&A, but I got to get through my little presentation here, and then we'll jump back in. So please, if you have questions that you've already asked, you know, please just save them. Yeah, that's not going to work. Yeah, I think you're just going to have to look on here. Okay. Do you have your glasses? Okay, then come closer to me. Okay. So my daughter's going to try to read some of these and write down actual questions, because I can't read them at the moment. Okay. So one of the conspiracy theories that came into play in this time period during the Great Plague was that the Jews were causing it. Okay, and I'm going to read you a little section from Wikipedia. That Jews were often taken as scapegoats, and accusations spread that Jews had caused the disease by deliberately poisoning wells. This is likely because they were affected less than other people, since many Jews chose not to use the common wells of towns and cities, and also because ritual hand washing happened to be part of Jewish practice. So, and some, unfortunately, confessed to poisoning wells under torture. So there was okay, so I'm going to keep going. So the first massacres directly related to the plague took place in April 1348 in France, where the Jewish quarter was sacked and 40 Jews were murdered in their homes. And the next occurred in Barcelona. In 1349, massacres and persecutions spread across Europe, including the Erfurt massacre, the Basel massacre. So these are, you know, in Germany and France and Flanders. And 2,000 Jews were burnt alive on 14th of February, 1349 in Strasbourg, where the plague hadn't even affected the city yet, but people were still freaking out and afraid. Okay, so that's one, you know, superstition or conspiracy theory that kind of came into play. Another one of those movements was something that I actually have in A Cloud of Outrageous Blue, which is this movement of flagellants. So the superstition was that, you know, God was punishing people by sending this horrible disease, and that if they could just repent enough, or if they could just what was called mortify the flesh enough, that maybe God would spare them and take the plague away. Now, this was not officially sanctioned by the Catholic Church at all. Okay, so it's very important to understand that there is a difference between spirituality and superstition. And so, you know, not everything that went on during the plague that happened to be done by Christians was sanctioned by the church. Okay, so we need to make like a very strong distinction between those things. So I'm going to read you a chapter. And the flagellant movement, not the flatulent movement, by the way, was this movement among people who were, you know, some of them were trying to extort people for money. Some of them really believed that if they took these really drastic measures, that maybe God would turn away the plague. Okay. So I'm going to read you this section. Okay. So this section is in the Priory. This should not be a spoiler. The plague has really hit, and people are dying all over the place. And they need to go to the town to get men to dig some more graves. Okay, so I'll read this. After the men dig the trench, I get them paid and fed, and we show them to the gatehouse with just enough daylight left for them to find their way back to town. But as we step onto the main path, we hear a grisly sound. It's all chaos and orange sparks and billows, a jumble of shouts and chants and howling. We had locked the gates when we came back from town, but the dull red pounding of bodies thrusting against them makes the lock give way, and the doors fling wide on a wild procession. There is a boy of about 12 right at the front, carrying a cross made of hazel poles. Behind him, 3 other boys bear torches at full flame. Following them are hundreds of men, walking 2 by 2. They are stripped half naked, their white robes rolled down around their waists and trailing down to the ground like upside-down lilies. They're yowling a pitiful song of penance. And in their hands, they hold leather whips. Thwop, thwop. They are beating their own backs, bloody. My head swims and I shut my eyes against the nausea and shock. I've heard of monks doing things like this in secret, but everyone knows it's shameful. A lot of fat men trying to make themselves feel better about their gluttony, Dad would say. The Lord already shed his own blood, Mam would say. Why try to add to it? The men come in, tearing at their flesh with the whips, and then, as though they're given a signal, the whole line of them hits the ground prostrate and spreads their arms out wide on the ground, like living crosses, still singing. From the back of the line, the last 2 men stand, pick up their flails, and begin stepping over each man in front of them, a whip to each back, and they become first in line. The procession completely blocks the bridge, the only way out of the Priory without going upriver. There's nothing to do but stand aside and try to slip past them once they all come in. Who are they? Mason asks the diggers' ringleader. Were they the ones in St. Mary's the other night? They've been holed up in that church all week. Why did they come to the Priory, I ask. Guess those bloodsuckers ran out of donations, says the man. They pick up desperate stragglers in every town. I think there's double the number that came into Thornchester. Murdered the priest. The priest. He didn't make it out after all. The sight of 300 men beating themselves to a pulp is shocking enough, but along the edges are women shrieking like fanatics. They reach out their hands to the bloody backs of the men, get a palm full of blood, and call out while smearing it across their own faces. "O holy man of God, pray for me. Just a touch of the hem of your garment will heal me. Say the word, O anointed, and I will be healed." Starving for someone to tell them how they might escape wrath. We lean against the high wall flanking the gatehouse, but there's no escaping the notice of the agitated crowd. Suddenly, the men at the front of the throng turn their attention toward the gravediggers. The new leader points his flail at them. "Sons of the devil," he says, "with drink on their breath in this holy place, at the very time they should be killing their flesh." Mason and I duck into a recess in the wall at just the right moment to avoid the fate of the drunkards, watching with horror as the mob descends and beats all 6 of them to death. So, kind of grisly. Sorry about that, guys. But this is actually a historical movement that happened, unfortunately, and again, was a superstitious religious movement not sanctioned by the church. Crazy stuff. Okay. So what are some better ways that we might be able to handle this other than, superstition or blaming or engaging in conspiracy theories? Well, one of the ways that I'm seeing a lot of people do, and some of you even said in the beginning, was that you're turning your attention toward a lot of creativity. And some people are getting back into crocheting or writing or riding horses I saw before, like just these creative and fun ways of doing things that don't mean you need to be stuck in the house, but you can kind of engage with some different creative ways again. If you're familiar with the illustrator Carson Ellis, if you go on her Instagram, she's doing a daily art prompt. You don't have to know how to draw to be able to do it. It's just she gives you a fun prompt and you can draw whatever comes to your imagination. But why are these things so important? We could just stick in our houses and kind of like prep, and hoard food or just like, go from one thing to the next or read the news all day. But at a certain point of the day, or at a certain point in time, this is going to be over. And 98% of us are going to emerge from this without even having had the disease or intersect. Like there's need for caution, but there's not need for panic. And if we can take the long view and kind of figure out what kind of people do we want to be at the end of this kind of thing, and how can we hold out hope, then creativity is a really great way to do that and to keep your kind of mental health alert. We've heard of, I don't know if you guys have seen some of these news reports about people in Italy who, or in Israel, who have these apartment buildings facing each other, and they're going to balconies and they're having parties on their balconies, like from afar, and singing on their balconies and making music together. So even though they can't be, closer than 6 feet, they're finding creative ways to get through it. And I want to just talk about 2 really creative things that I've heard about in the last 24 hours. One of them is in Italy. One of the hospitals was really hard hit and ran out of some supplies, namely this one little valve, this ICU valve that helps control things like oxygen and different things coming through the hospital. And they ran out of these valves and they couldn't get restocked. So I guess a doctor had a friend of a friend who had a 3D printer, and they brought the 3D printer to the hospital. And within a couple of hours, they had designed and printed these little ICU valves on the 3D printer, and they were able to get back functioning. And in fact, the company that made the ICU valves got mad at the people who, came up with this quick invention. Anyway, so it's just an example. It's not all arts. It's people putting their minds toward creative solutions in the moment. So when we're all sitting at home, we don't have to just be twiddling our thumbs waiting for the crisis to end. We can really be turning our minds toward creative endeavors. And I can't spoil anything, but in A Cloud of Outrageous Blue, that's what Edith does too. Her creativity really comes to the forefront, and she's able to find some solutions. And then another really interesting thing that's happening is at Harvard, and on the YouTube, I'm going to put these links in the comments later, but I want to read to you about this thing called Project Open Air, which is a kind of open source creation of medical devices, namely ventilators, because we have heard that there's like a shortage of ventilators, and that if there's a spike in people who need them, we're already like approaching the maximum. So if you go to projectopenair.org, this is an effort started by a Harvard student, I believe a graduate student, who is, it's an open lab platform, and they're gathering people with all different kinds of skills to be able to build ventilators and medical equipment within their own communities, so that you don't have to order it from another, part of the world or another company and be, in this backlog. So I just thought those were 2 really amazing ways that people were turning their minds towards solutions and creativity, and just not just being idle and creativity. It helps you to get over the anxiety, because we can't really do anything. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I feel a crisis, I feel like I just want to do something and fix it. But there's literally nothing I can do except just stay home and not be a point of contact for people, So, so let's see what comes out of this, and let's try to, think of some solutions. Maybe they're not huge solutions like that, but maybe they're just solutions for the people around you. All right. And getting outside, like I'm putting in a garden. I'm taking this opportunity to just get outside as much as I possibly can. It's healthy, it keeps my spirits up. And one of the other things that I'm doing and my family's doing is we're turning to prayer. We're taking communion together every day. We're not giving way to the worry and the fear. We're trying to figure out ways to stay above this and to love each other as a family, and to really help each other. Okay, so now we'll start a Q&A. I've been glancing over at these YouTube comments, and there's a lot of nonsense going on, so you guys can please stop. Stop with the nonsense. And I didn't expect anything different on YouTube, unfortunately. But now we're going to start an actual real Q&A, and I've got the Instagram and the YouTube here. So my daughter's going to help me here with fielding some questions. So do you want to look at Instagram and I'll look at YouTube? Okay. Okay, here's an interesting question. Why Cloud of Outrageous Blue if it was the Black Plague? By the way, I loved What the Night Sings, and I can't wait for the new book. Thank you. Okay, so Cloud of Outrageous Blue actually has to do with the character herself, Edith. She is somebody who has a condition called synesthesia. If any of you have synesthesia or know what it is, you can feel free to comment on that. But synesthesia is a crossing over of the senses. So it's people who might be able to see color or taste sound, if you've ever heard of that, or people who see numbers and letters as different colors or textures or things like that, or people who can feel things in their skin, like physically feel emotion or things like that. So you'll have to read the book to find out why blue, but it has to do with something that causes Edith to have very intense synesthetic reactions. And so, yeah, spreading rumors makes stuff worse. Rumors cause fear, and we have nothing to fear but fear itself. Fear is a killer, you guys. Anything negative that you see coming out of this that's not, that, you know, besides the disease, including, I think, some of the ways people are reacting by like hoarding and things like that, that's coming out of fear, and fear never does anything good for anybody. Okay, Trash Gaming says, I've been playing basketball outside at least 2 hours every day when the weather's good. That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm not going to address any conspiracy theories in here, so you can leave that alone. How did you feel when What the Night Sings was chosen for Battle of the Books at your daughter's school? Oh, I was over the moon. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I'm really glad to know that people are reading it and engaging with it. And yeah, it's pretty fun that my daughter's at the age where she and her friends are reading it. So that's really awesome. Thank you, Caitlin. How many people died in the Black Plague, I assume that you're saying? I don't have the exact figure, but it was in the millions, and it was between 30 and 60%, depending on the area and the region and the country. 30 to 60% of people died from the Black Death. It was not just how many people were infected. So we're talking millions of people died. Like an average of half the population of Europe died from the Great Plague. So that is not what we're dealing with here, you guys. And that is, you know, we know a lot more about modern medicine. We know about washing our hands. We have germ theory now. You know, we know about these things. Okay, so that's not going to happen. Why do you seem to do a lot of books on plagues? Will you do one on the Spanish flu? I don't do books only on plagues. I do books on crisis. I do books on sort of mass crisis, I guess you could say, Ian, but not just plagues. And I probably will not write one on the Spanish flu. I think I'm plagued out for a little while, especially with all of this stuff happening. I see that Instagram only gives us a short time. So I'm actually going to, when that runs out, I'll start the live again so we can have more Q&A time, okay? Why is plague spread by rats? So I don't know the epidemiology of that, but we know that, you know, diseases can jump from animal to human, which is actually what happened in the case here of coronavirus. Why do you choose to write about what you write about? I will talk about that in 1 minute. Okay, I'm going to relaunch the Instagram live. So you guys on YouTube, just hold on 1 second. I'm going to do that and then I'll come back. Okay. Okay. Let me just go live again here. Okay, hi Instagram. I'm back live here. And so if you want to jump back in, I'm also on YouTube and I'm fielding questions now. Okay. How long does it take to write a book? My books, because I also illustrate them, and I didn't show you guys any of the illustrations. Oh my goodness. My books take from beginning to publication between 2 and 3 years. So let's see if I can show you an illustration. Okay, so here we were just talking about Edith's synesthesia. So there is an image of one of her synesthetic reactions. Okay, I'll show you more as we go on. But yeah, because I'm also illustrating the books, I cannot write a book a year. Like I know some people can even write a few books a year. I can't do that. So I hope that you enjoy the fact that this is like a multi-sensory experience. All right, I'm going to just turn to Instagram here and see some of these. Okay, so hi to all of you guys who are joining me again. Thank you for coming back. Yes, we have plenty of time to keep this thing going for a little while. None of us are doing anything else. That's not true. I'm still working on a new book, but rats were carriers of the plague bacteria and often brought the plague onto merchant ships, infecting the sailors who would then port in Italy. Yeah. So rats, you know, also like their feces could get into the food that might have been on the ships and stuff like that. So, and then once it jumped from, you know, animal to human, and then it was human to human contact. So, you know, that's an interesting thought too, because this was, you know, we think of the medieval world as this like where nobody ever went anywhere and people were just kind of stayed in their one little village. That is not true. People in the Middle Ages traveled widely, and they didn't just know about their own little communities. Like they were intersecting with people all over the known world. So this was at the height of the Silk Road, for example. So there was a lot of trade going back and forth between Asia and India and Europe, and you know, all the way out to the British Isles and Africa. And so like there was a lot of commerce and a lot of opportunity for disease to spread because people were interacting with each other a lot. And so same thing here, you know, this is the reason why the virus was able to spread so quickly, because we do have a lot of contact with each other and a lot of travel. So it's interesting. It's, you know, it's just not, it wasn't so different of a world back then. Does your research on this topic have to change to fit the story you want to share? That's interesting. I don't tweak historical facts to fit my story. No. So if I am, because I'm writing historical fiction, my actual historical facts have to be tight. And my copy editor catches those things and will call me out on it if I have something that's inaccurate. That being said, there is a lot that you have to fill in the blanks with. And so there are instances where I will shift my story to fit the historical facts, or sometimes I will, if I find that I'm kind of like going in, the research is kind of going in this one direction and it's not fitting the story, sometimes I'll see if there is a tangent that's still historically accurate, where I can make the story kind of go in a different direction, or, you know, so that's kind of how that works. Let's see. How long does it take you to gather all the information for your book? So I'm still researching all the way up until the very end of writing the book, because I'm always checking and rechecking my historical accuracy. Let's see. I would say in the beginning, after I've written my first draft, like when I'm in the second draft, I would say about 75% of my time is spent researching. It's huge. It's really, really heavy, which is another reason why I can't write a book a year. My books just take a long time to make because I want to get really accurate. What made you want to become an author and illustrator? So I've always wanted to be an illustrator since I was a little girl. And I have been, you know, for about, I won't tell you how many years, a long time. And I'm just going to wave at you Instagram folks here. So I always knew that I wanted to illustrate picture books, for example. Never, ever, ever thought I would be a writer until I was in my 30s. And I drew a character, and this character just seemed to want to be a story. Like she seemed to want to tell me her story. And so I started writing it down, and pretty soon it became a novel. That novel is not published. Hopefully it will be someday. But it was the first time I realized, oh, the whole time I've been illustrating, I've actually been telling stories in pictures. And now I've just kind of brought along text into that process. So yeah, please don't spam, guys. Just show respect to the people who are on here for school and stuff like that. Okay. How long did this book take you to make? Yeah. Yeah, about 3 years. Well, by the time it comes out in August, it'll be 3 years. Let's see. Do you think censorship has a major role to play in the spread of new disease? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Feel free to expand on your question if you could elaborate. Is writing a book hard? Yes, writing a book is very difficult. Every writer will tell you that. If you ever meet a writer who says, "Oh, I just love writing. It's like so delightful. It's like the best time in the world," they're probably not telling the truth. It's really, really hard work. Do you have a set story about the topic you're writing about before you start, or inspiration? I don't have a set story, but usually what'll happen is I'll read about something interesting to me. You know, I've always loved the Middle Ages, so I kind of always have wanted to write about that time period. I love manuscript illumination because I studied a lot of it in school. And so kind of writing about somebody who is involved in creating illuminated manuscripts, which Edith is in this book. Yeah. And so I kind of let the character tell me their story. I just, you know, try to put myself in the character's shoes. I try to imagine their world. I just want to make sure I'm doing this. And I kind of let the story unfold. So when I first started writing this book, I really wasn't sure what time period I would be writing about. But I found that anything before, let's say 1300, it was kind of difficult to find historical sources. It was just, it's not impossible, obviously, but it was just a lot more challenging to fill in the historical aspects that I needed. Whereas, you know, around the time of the Great Plague, it started to be like, there started to be a lot more primary source information. How did you get into historical fiction? You got me. I failed history in high school. I failed English in high school. I never thought it was interesting then, but probably because I was being asked to memorize a lot of dates and facts. And that's not really what history is. History is just the story of people making choices and how those choices intersect. And yeah, I think so. You'll never run out of material if you're writing historical fiction because there's millions of events that you could write about. What is your favorite book that you've made? I can't answer that question, really. I love different things about all of them. What else? Do you enjoy writing for YA? So that's really interesting. I never thought I would write for YA at all. I was really into picture books, but I found that writing about teen protagonists takes me right back to a really important time of my life where I was becoming an adult and making a lot of important decisions. It's like a really, really loaded time of your life, you know? So I really enjoy it. And I'm really, really enjoying this, getting to meet all the students that I get to talk to. So thank you guys for joining as well. Are rats the main cause of the outbreak? You mean of the Great Plague? Well, as I said before, there's many, many different illnesses that can jump from animals to humans. So the jury's still out a little bit on whether it was specifically rats that caused it. I mean, we can't really know because, like, you know, 700 years ago, we're scientists and epidemiologists and historians and archaeologists that, you know, they conjecture that that's probably what happened. But once it got from plague and the influenza pandemic of 1918, I am not qualified to answer that question. Sorry. You can read about that online. What do you wish you had known before starting writing your first novel? I guess I would have liked to know that it was okay for me to do, that it was possible, that just because I didn't study writing in college, I mean, I have 2 illustration degrees. I didn't think I had the right to write, and that's just not true. You don't have to study writing to be a writer. I think you just have to be an avid reader and you have to write. You mentioned that anti-Semitism during the Great Plague, you mentioned anti-Semitism. How do you see those things playing out now? Was there any resolution during that time? Well, I mean, I would say that particular wave probably culminated in the 1492 expulsion of the Jews from Spain. If you're just talking about how things compound upon each other, maybe starting at the Great Plague and then, continuing, I would have to do a little bit more reading about that specific wave to know playing out now. I don't see anti-Semitism specifically playing out during this outbreak, mainly because I think we're all still in a little bit of shock. But I have seen conspiracy theories coming out and a lot of xenophobia. That's not helpful. We are all in this and we know how this thing spreads. So I don't see that playing out. But of course, we did see an enormous leap in anti-Semitism right before this all happened. And I talk about that a lot when I visit schools, about how that kind of conspiracy-based hatred and racism can emerge in times of fear. And I think we were already in a time of great fear and blame and anger and outrage right before this happened. It'll be interesting to see how this kind of mitigates some of that. I think for me, I like the things that mattered a month ago and the kind of conversations we were having culturally a month ago, like they seem so ridiculously silly and vapid now. I'm just not even interested in talking about that stuff. So it'll be interesting to see if we kind of emerge with like a little bit better, consciousness of how we really are all in this together. So, this video will be uploaded for everyone to rewatch. Yes. What, this one? Where do you research your information? That one? So I'll always start with something silly, like an article online or, something I see on YouTube or, or Wikipedia or something. But I very, very quickly get off of that because I don't want to get any of my source information either online, unless it's like an archive online, like the the U.S. Holocaust Museum, has a valid archive of materials that you can access, or like the Metropolitan Museum of Art or something like that. But I very quickly try to go to primary sources, go to libraries, and things like that. Oh, and interviews and stuff, and like interviews with experts or interviews with eyewitnesses. Obviously not for the plague, but for researchers. Do you have any ideas for your next book? Yes, and I can't say literally anything about it right now. What am I currently reading? Oh, good question. So I'm going to show you. In terms of fiction, I'm currently reading The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, who actually did the endorsement for What the Night Sings. And I never got to finish that book because I got it from the library and I'm kind of a slow reader. So I didn't finish and I had to give it back. So I'm taking this time to read that. I'm also taking this time to read a stack of books about art. So primarily because I am starting a podcast in 2 weeks, and it's not going to be this long format, by the way. It's a 15-minute podcast once a week, but I'm reading a lot of books on art. So I'm reading Beauty, A Very Short Introduction by Roger Scruton, who is an aesthetic philosopher. Oh, Harley Payne, you know this book? Oh, great. Yeah, I love what he has to say about beauty and about art. I find it really, really incredible. I'm about to read Art Needs No Justification by Hans Rookmaker. Very, very slim volume. Very much recommended by my friend Stephen Roach. So I put that in my... I'm currently reading Art and Fear, Observations on the Perils and Rewards of Artmaking by David Bayles and Ted Orland. I can put links to all these in the notes. This is a great one. I reread the first chapter twice because it's just so profound. as an artist, you do have a lot of fear involved in that process. The Courage to Create by Rollo May. And last but not least, Culture Care by Mako Fujimura. Mako's a friend who I always find inspiration by what he has to say. So I'm reading a lot of books about art, a lot of books about art philosophy here, and diving into some of my favorite picture books as well. And just enjoying art at this time, enjoying creating art, writing, reading about it, and thinking about other things, I think I want to answer this one. How do you deal with writer's block? I'll tell you how. I write. So I'm currently doing the course, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. If any of you have heard of that, or if you haven't, it's like an instant cure for writer's block. It starts out every morning. You start out by writing 3 pages longhand, not on the computer, of what are called the morning pages. And it's just stream of consciousness writing for half an hour, 3 pages. And then when I hit the 3rd page, I stop. And it clears out all the clutter and allows you to just kind of like get deeper into your ideas. How do you figure out what type of event to write about and what gives you inspiration? I kind of answered that a little bit earlier. Who is your favorite author? Oh my gosh. I have so many favorite authors. Ooh, that's a really hard one. Wow, who's my favorite author? Maybe Dostoevsky. I think he is fantastic. A fantastic student of human nature. And I do believe in human nature. We are not blank slates by any means. Humans really tend to act in very predictable kinds of ways. So Dostoevsky, love Jane Austen. And in fact, okay, to your question, Emily, yes, I am giving you a hint. Not toward my next YA, but I am illustrating a picture book about Jane Austen. So that comes out next, I believe, January from Bloomsbury. So it's a picture book bio of Jane Austen. So you guys can geek out. So I have been, diving into some Jane Austen. Oh, right now. Oh, definitely one of my favorite authors is Chaim Potok. So we're reading right now as a family his book, The Chosen. But definitely his favorite book of mine is My Name is Asher Lev. And I think every artist needs to read that book for sure. Do you prefer to draw characters or locations? Oh, wow. They're both equally hard. Yeah. I think characters probably. I went for a long time not realizing that my portfolio had no interiors in them. Like I had no setting. It was just like characters on atmospheric backgrounds. So I had to really kind of dive back into that. What is my favorite book that I didn't write? This is going to maybe sound cheesy to some of you, but honestly, the Bible. I read the Bible quite often. If you want to talk about human nature and human reaction and like the basis for the culture that we live in, it's the Bible. Yeah. It's pretty amazing. It's lest you think that the Bible is just a rule book. It is a book of human history, and it is fascinating. The art behind me is from the Jane Austen picture book biography. Let's see. But it will be in color, so I'm not giving anything away by having these behind me. I think I kind of answered that one before. Let's see. Let's see some of these other ones. Yeah, I answered that before, Quinn. What is your favorite book of the Bible and or Bible verse? My favorite book of the Bible, probably Hebrews. I think that has a lot of really great stuff to say, but I also really like the book of Job. I did my graduate thesis on the book of Job. I actually made a picture book of the book of Job. And it wasn't about this crazy, it really wasn't about Job. It was more about the questions that God asks Job, which I think are calling him back into a sense of wonder and awe. and back into curiosity after crisis. Actually, wow, I didn't even think of this. Okay, so in the book of Job, it's this huge crisis. This guy loses everything, loses his whole family. He loses everything he owns. Everything's destroyed in this freak moment, and he gets the plague. Oh my gosh, this is so relevant. And so, and his friends come, Job, yeah, it's spelled J-O-B. So his friends come in and they start like telling him it's all his fault and it's because he's a sinner and all this stuff. And Job's like, I didn't do anything wrong. All this stuff just happened to me. And so toward the end of the book of Job, God comes and asks him these series of like 60 questions or so. And it's stuff like, do you know where I keep the storehouses of snow? Were you there when I created the light? You know, and I think that some people read that and they hear accusation. They hear God wagging his finger at Job, like, you just better take your medicine and deal with it. But I don't read it that way at all. I read it as like, Job, you've been through all this suffering. You've lost everything. Now I want to call you back into a sense of wonder over my world. I want to reintroduce you to beauty and to mystery. And so that's kind of what I did the picture book about. I've been trying to sell that picture book for 3 years. It's a little bit of a hard sell, but you know, hopefully someday that'll get published. Let's see. My favorite Bible story is Esther, says Anna. I love Esther, and we just celebrated Purim. So, yeah, love it. That was my favorite holiday growing up. I grew up in a Jewish home, and I love Esther. Yeah, there really is something to that sense that one person can really make a difference to their time and turn back a crisis. Wow. It's all so relevant. How many books have you made? I have 2 YA books published. I have a handful of picture books published, and more coming. What quote do I live by the most? There's no one I can choose. I think, love your neighbor. Love God and love your neighbor. Let's see. Are we kind of coming to the end here? Is there any person who inspired your art style? Yeah, I'll tell you a few influences. Hilary Knight, who illustrated, most people know him from Eloise, but he has a completely different art style that really taught me how to draw. I really do love some contemporary people I love. I'm just looking right now, Carson Ellis, Isabel Arsenault, Julia Sarda, John Hendricks, my friend. Yeah, my daughter just mentioned that. Oh yeah, behind me I have Nora Krug's book, Belonging, and John Hendricks's The Faithful Spy. Love those guys. Yeah. Yeah, be chill, don't be a jerk. Yeah, that's good. Do I use ideas from other books? Great question, Sam Kent. So I have a rule for myself that when I'm writing a book about a certain time period, I do not read any fiction having to do with that time period, because I want to make sure that I am not getting any kind of influence from another author. And what's interesting is when you write historical fiction, sometimes there's like these certain books that people go to that like everybody who writes about that time period goes to. And so after I was finished writing A Cloud of Outrageous Blue, I read Ken Follett's 2 of his books from Pillars of the Earth and World Without End. And World Without End has to do with the plague. And I started seeing all these things crop up that I knew where his sources were from. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad I didn't read this book before I wrote mine, or while I was writing mine, because, you know, people could think we were drinking from the same pool or something. Sylvia Lilly says, assuming secondary students are watching, what message do you want them to take away from your virtual visit with regards to comparing the plague of A Cloud of Outrageous Blue and the coronavirus? I guess the biggest thing would be, don't give way to fear. Don't panic. Do what you know to do, you know, tangibly, physically, which is stay home. Love your family, get to know your family again, find a way to live in peace with your family, but also find creative things to do. Find creative things to do, and think a lot about the kind of person that you want to be, because you have a lot of time to sit and think, and do a lot of introspection at this time. That would be my big takeaway. So stay creative, stay positive. All right, I think I'm just going to do another couple minutes here, and then I'm starting to get a little hoarse from talking. So thanks, Pepper, for joining. Anna, I just addressed that for Sylvia. No, Ian, I've not read that. Am I ever stuck of thinking of stuff to write about? No, because once you start writing one book, you're like, ooh, I could write about that. I could write about that. And I could write about that. And they just keep going. Any suggestions for writers? Just write every day. I would definitely suggest doing the artist way if you feel stuck. You can get your hands on it, anywhere. It's just a book called The Artist Way, and it'll guide you through that process. Daniel, not to my knowledge. I really check my historical stuff very, very closely, or I don't put it in if there's any question. All right, guys, I think we're at the end here. I just want to make sure I didn't miss any questions here in the Instagram. Thank you guys so much for joining. Oh my goodness. Ian, that's a great question about how gender barriers of the 1300s affect the book. I'll probably do another one of these visits in the next week or so. And I'll address that, because that's a very interesting question. Ideas for young writers to write about. I bet that some of your favorite authors who are on social media might be giving writing prompts. But I would look at NaNoWriMo's website, NaNoWriMo. They should have some writing prompts there. I think they have like a writing camp, like an online camp, where they can give you some prompts. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been epic. Been on here for an hour and 17. And feel free to, here's how we can keep in touch. Okay? First of all, you can follow me on Instagram at Vesper Illustration. You can find my new podcast, which is called Vesperisms. And that is still in process of being published. It's on Spotify right now. But if you just come to my website, you can find that. That's going to be launching April 1st, if not before. I'm going to try to launch it before. You can find A Cloud of Outrageous Blue and pre-order it now, wherever you like to buy books. Thanks, Ian. Thanks for asking great questions. And let's see. You can also go to my Etsy shop. I'm going to be putting up some prints from A Cloud of Outrageous Blue. And I've got brand new pins, which my daughter's going to show you, actually. I've got these butterfly pins from What the Night Sings. They're enamel. They're black metal with enamel color. And they're really fun. They're a nice little thing to have. And yeah, so stay in touch, write to me, keep the questions coming. You can DM me. And thanks for pre-ordering already, Paula. I love that. Okay, enjoy your day, you guys, and we'll be in touch soon. Okay, take care. Bye.